Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me this week is Dan Mahon, founding member of Canna. Thank you very much for joining me today, Dan.
Thank you for having me, David.
Before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You can also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Dan, I always like to start the podcast with a little bit of background. So how did you find yourself coming to cannabis?
So it started off like most people during Prohibition times. It was a friend's older sibling that had actually first introduced me to cannabis. I knew right away after trying it that it was something that could definitely help. Later on, in high school, I went to a debate class and my topic was cannabis. And then with more research into the subject and how it became to be illegal and stuff like that, it really wanted me to get involved more with the plant and advocacy for it.
How did you find that it could help you?
So immediately I felt with my muscular dystrophy, I was born with muscular dystrophy. It's a muscular degenerative disease. I found a lot of relief in my muscular tissues, and it was pretty instant. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew it was a positive effect.
Okay. Up until that point, what had treatment consisted of?
So I wasn't officially diagnosed with muscular dystrophy till I was 13, and I have a rarer form of it, so it was a little bit harder for them to diagnose. And then I started consuming at 15, so they didn't really have a treatment plan. It was just a lot of tests, a lot of hit and miss. They were just trying anything they could to figure out what was actually going on with me.
So when you had that moment, when you first tried it and almost instantaneously realized that it could provide you relief, kind of what was going through your head at the time?
Again, the more I learned about it, I couldn't understand why it was such a demonized plant and why the history of it was such, and then, like I said, I started doing the research. I read up on books, and it just felt like a bad way to represent the plant, how most of what I had seen.
So what leads you to found or be a founding member of Canna?
So I had originally started growing and I was kind of isolated by myself. I was listening to a few podcasts. Growcast podcast was a big one, the DGC. And then I actually went to a public event for the first time, and coming from the history that I had come from, that was pretty taboo. You didn't consume in public, you didn't talk about it in public. And then I met Jordan River of Growcast, and he was adamant about getting me on Discord because I wasn't into social media. And then I attended the first Cultivator Cup, and I met a fellow member named Geeky C Art who was dealing with a completely different set of disabilities than I was. And the more him and I got to talking, the more I realized there wasn't a space for people with physical disabilities or any disabilities to congregate, talk about gardening styles, what helps them in the garden and what doesn't. So we decided that that's our mission, is to just try to reach as many people as we can and help them in their gardens get their own medicine.
What was it like when you finally found that community?
It was pretty amazing. I had also pretty quickly met up with a gentleman named Titan who does breeding for Blessed Coast Seeds, and he is in a wheelchair for completely different circumstances, but going through a lot of the same stuff we were going through, trying to figure out what works for him, what doesn't. And the more I reached out, the more I found we have Mr. Toad from Boneyard Seeds and Mandy from Bud and Lather, all dealing with very similar things, but in their own way. So the more we get together, the more we find similarities and ways to help each other.
When did you start growing?
So it's a funny story because I'd always been having to deal with the free market, and the last time I did, the guy that was helping me actually ended up getting robbed.
Mm.
And I ended up coming to my spouse and I told her, I'm 40 years old. I can't be having people running out of alleys bleeding from their ears talking about what had happened. So I talked with her and we both decided that it was much safer for me to just have my own little 2x4 setup. And that was 2019 or late 2019, early 2020. So I have not been doing this for very long. I'm still learning every day. I learn from all of our members on a daily basis.
How did things go with that first grow?
It was okay, a lot of learning. I had bought a cheap kit off of the internet. It was a tent, some lights and stuff, and most of it wasn't adequate for what I was trying to accomplish. So that was a lot of learning with low powered lights and humidity regulation, things like that. But with all the podcasts and stuff and the information that's out there nowadays, it's pretty easy to kind of get a basis on what you need to do. And a lot of the bro science seems to be getting this whatever you would say.
Kind of
Um,
discredited?
yeah, discredited, and more white papers are being released and more research is actually being done into the plant. So entry points are a lot easier nowadays, it seems. And with legalization coming online, it seems that a lot more people have the opportunity to make their own medicine.
So over the years, since that first time you had tried it and it helped you with muscular dystrophy, has there been more research? Has there been more into how it can help patients with that specific ailment?
Sadly, no, there is
No.
not much the way of the medicinal effects being studied with bigger, you know, pharmaceuticals and stuff like that. It seems to just be trial and error for the user themselves to find what strains actually work for them and, where how they can acquire them to be able to provide their own medicine. But yeah, the medical field is kind of slow to get involved with this, especially with the federal laws. They
Hmm.
can't really do as much, but there is a lot of work coming out of Spain and other countries. Germany, I know, is doing some more studies on just the basic, terpenes, cannabinoids, and what they do to affect people. And everybody has different effects. So
It definitely has been frustratingly slow on the, just greenlighting research in academia where, that's their thing. That's what they're good at.
yeah, that's kind of the system we're going to have to rely on coming in the future is, the bigger universities and medical systems that could actually look into it. It is a double-edged sword because then they'll, use it to monetize it and whatever else they will do with it. But just so the research gets out there for the end user, that's kind of the most important thing. And then we can decipher through that what we need to pull out of it.
So in those early days of Canna Capable, how do you guys set it up? What are you learning from each other? And how do you start spreading the word?
So we modeled ourselves kind of off of the Growcast membership with a Discord based. We do the Instagram as well. It's just word of mouth, trying to find our members. A couple members that joined in weren't physically disabled, but they knew somebody that they had helped in the past or that they are currently helping under the caregiver licenses and stuff. So we're just trying to slowly build, and the more I can get out there and meet people. We recently did the Cultivator Cup. It was our first public event. So, you know, people with disabilities tend to be a little bit more clandestine or shy, and doing public events is a very stressful thing, on both ends for me trying to meet people, and people with disabilities just going to these places sometimes is hard. But we meet members doing this stuff, so that's why I'm here doing this as well. It's just trying to get the us out there so we can find the people and get them the help we can provide.
Does over the counter cultivation equipment work for people with disabilities, or does it all need to be modified in some way?
So most of the stuff seems to be helpful nowadays, like with the AC Infinity controllers, we can control our lights, our tents, all of our VPD or whatever. There are many things, and that's where we come in with handy hacks, is we show things that have worked for people with disabilities in the past in the gardens, like watering wands are a big thing for being able to reach your pots if you can't get into your tent all the way or your grow space. I recently, when I hurt my back, found aquarium scissors. They're about 12-inch long aquarium scissors. So you can get in on the plants and defoliate them. And we're just trying to make it so it's as streamlined as possible. We have many growers doing many different styles. They do earth boxes, grow bags, grow beds. So whatever style we can help them with is kind of where we'll steer them towards. And a lot of the equipment nowadays seems to be able to help because it's geared up towards automation, it's geared up towards ease of grow for just the regular consumer as well, but it definitely helps in our space a lot more.
Were there any other handy hacks that kind of surprised you by how many people were able to use them?
Yeah, besides the watering wand's been a really big one. Magnets, we use little magnets to I'll put my trim scissors or my grabber arm like right on the poles of the tents.
Mhm.
Those have been really helpful for me. It kind of comes down to just what you need in your garden and what your gardening style is. Grabber arms, magnets, it, even certain scissors. Some people like the scissors with the spring in it because it'll help reopen after it starts getting sticky. Other people with hand problems can't use those kind of scissors, so they'll go for scissors with no spring, and that's just what works for them. So we try to give them as much information, as many options as possible on what has worked for other members, and then let them choose from there.
As you started working within the community, working with people like Jordan from Growcast, were you surprised by how the community sort of welcomed and embraced you and kind of helped you thrive as a cultivator?
Yeah, it's been really surprising. Even at the recent Cultivator Cup, the 3 weeks of build up was so stressful. You don't know what's going to work. I've reached out to other Canna capable members who have done public events, and they were so helpful and let me know. You're at a table for long amounts of time. You can't consume flowers, so maybe lean on edibles a little more to help with the pain management. Have freebies to hand out. And Jordan has pretty much walked me through. He put me on the podcast first, because I was already comfortable with him. Um, they've just all been so supportive, and even from outside the community, at the Cultivator Cup, a couple people had come up and they heard from us through A, B, and C, and they were so happy to support us, and it was a huge relief for me to see that what we are doing is actually reaching people and is helping make a difference.
Has have any members of the community uh, without disabilities come up with any of the handy hacks that you were able to use?
Yeah, absolutely. With the grower wand came from a member who was in the community just wanting to see what we had going, and they put that out there, and it's helped a couple of our members. My cousin, who's just started cultivating, he's been using it. He's capable, minus he had a stroke, so he's half blind, but it's helped him so much in his garden as well. It's just getting the knowledge out there that is what we're trying to do.
Well, in talking about getting the knowledge out there, why is it important to you to empower those with physical disabilities to grow cannabis?
It it's become more important because the more I meet people who have either failed trying their first time and have been shy to not do it again, or didn't want to put up the money for the genetics to try, because seeds can be expensive at some points. Seeing the people when they find that we exist and the happiness in their face that they have found a community that is accepting of whatever ailments they have, that's kind of what motivates me, is trying to help as many people light up and start their own mission for gardening, because even if it's not cannabis cultivation, I've now started growing peppers outside. It snowballs quickly, but even if they want to be self-sustainable for food, that's kind of what keeps us going. It's just finding the new members and seeing how excited they are to actually be able to do these things on their own.
How large is the community now?
Right now, we're just under 200 members. We're pretty small. It's slow going because again, people with disabilities tend to want to be a little bit more private, a little bit more protected or reserved, and I see the walls fall down when they do find us.
You know, what can the industry do, the larger cannabis industry, uh, to open up access to cultivation to people with disabilities?
Realizing that we are a viable market in the cultivation industry and that, we could bring some new things or options for them for sale is huge. Um, it's going to be a growing market. People nowadays, they want to be self-sufficient with their medicine if possible and not have to rely on a sometimes dispensary system that is less than educated for the end consumer. They kind of break it down to a indica sativa, do you want to go to sleep? Do you want to be energetic? Which that doesn't even apply to the plant. You can have some indicas that will give you energy where that's not what the consumer wants. So we want to educate them as well on different different aspects of the plant, different ways of consumption is really important too, because some people can't use like a water pipe or something, or if they want to consume concentrates, a dab rig with a blowtorch is not a viable option for some people. So different ways of consumption too are really big for the industry to look into for people with disabilities.
Well, what are some of those new options or new product ideas that are out there? I mean, are there some people that are kind of, hacking it together to make it work for them where, with some product development help, you think there's a real opportunity there?
So yes, like nutrient systems are a big thing. I use rooted leaf liquid organics, and it's a non-pH system. And ever since I've started using that, I've had less problems in the grow, better yields, all that kind of stuff. But also some people like grow dots have been immensely helpful in my garden and a bunch of members' gardens because it's a controlled release fertilizer where you just mix it in with your medium or soil and you kind of water only and it just releases through the run. I use it a lot for my smaller plants just so I can just water only, hit them and go. So things like that, things that streamline the gardening process. Again, the AC Infinity controllers have been really helpful. Things like that, lighting, controllable lighting where you could dim it through your phone.
Hmm.
These
Like,
things are very helpful in the gardens.
have you or anyone from the community tried reaching out to the larger industry with some of these ideas to see if they'd be open to developing them?
We have not. It is definitely something I have to concentrate more on. Is as I get out there, I have to the squeaky wheel doesn't get greased kind of thing. I have to get in these people's ears and just be able to talk to them about, certain even grow tents. If there was a grow tent with a flush entry to it, would be so helpful for so many people in wheelchairs and not in wheelchairs. It's just stepping over the threshold is I have to basically push my chair up into the tent to be able to get to some of the back plants to water them. So just little things like that. If we can get out there and talk to some of these manufacturers and distributors and let them know that there's a market for it as well, that's kind of what drives everything is the profitability of these things. So
Has there been or have there been any new strains that you've had recently that you've found particularly exciting?
So it's more of the old strains that I've been getting into that I have found a lot of the medicinal. Pre 98 Bubba is something I've gotten into a lot lately. That has been an amazing strain for me. We actually had another member, Goodfoot, do a breeding project with it, and we just released the seeds to our members, feminized strains that we tried to cross with other medicinal plants. cherry paloma, the JR token cut, which has been really good for people with epilepsy, seizures, things like that. So we tried to incorporate that into our crosses. What was another old one I just had? Oh, 96 sour diesel was a nice one. It seems the older ones have more of a clear effect, if that makes sense. It's not as muddled, where the newer ones you get the nice flavors and stuff, but the medicinal effect on some of them seems to be lacking. LA Kush was another one that was an old school strain that has been really medicinal. A new one, a newer one called Cap Junkie.
Mm.
Pretty much across the board, people in our Discord, if they've gotten their hands on it, they've enjoyed that one too.
Where do you procure your genetics?
The Growcast community has been very generous with any cuts. Farmer John of Farmer's Finos has given me some of the most. He gave us the LA Kush, his garlic breath, which was very medicinal. I do hunt a lot of seeds too. I like to go through seeds and look for unique things. A lot of the people in the membership have donated genetics to our members that we end up sending out to them free of charge. You know, we pay for the shipping, we put the bundles together. So the genetics come from far and wide, but they all we try to get them together here and get the right stuff to the right members.
What kind of record keeping do you do just to see how each grow has gone, how each genetic has performed? Do you kind of have like a growing database of information?
Yeah, so what I try to do is, like I said, I try to look through as many strains as possible, and then I try to get those in as many of the members' hands as possible so
Hmm.
they can see and I can get a little bit of feedback on how it's been helping them or if it hasn't had any effect. And then I just try to keep that in mind going down in the future with sending out genetics to certain people and things like that. But yeah, it's a lot of community feedback and a lot of, I send them little papers so they can write down what they thought and then just send it back to me so I can get the right genetics into the right people's hands because that's as important as anything else in the garden.
How have you found success building a community on social media? You have a large following on Discord. I mean, what's worked for you? What hasn't worked for you?
Yeah, so being social media adverse before all of this, it's been a big learning curve for me. But I have a couple members who are way more technologically advanced than I am. They have helped set up the Discord, the Instagram, and I just try to keep plugging at it. I'm learning as I go with all of that, but having the members that have set up Discord channels or our one member, Geeky C Art, who is he is the reason why I started all of this. He has been hugely helpful with getting us on Instagram, Facebook, a bunch of platforms I've never heard of also, or I don't end up going on, but it's been a community there too, a community effort to get us set up and doing all these things.
I'm admittedly very ignorant when it comes to Discord. I mean, it's just it's one of those like there's only so much time in the day things
Yeah.
for me where anytime I go in there, I'm just like, what am I doing? So, what kind of content are you sharing on there? What are you guys? What is the community sharing with one another?
Yeah, so the Discord is definitely a learning curve, but it is where we are mainly based because it is cannabis friendly, where other things I can't really post,
Hmm.
my garden or anything unless we get flagged. And I definitely don't want to jeopardize any of the following we've built up. Um, but yeah, on the Discord, we share a lot of how our gardens are going, what we're looking through currently. We have a section for people with disabilities that's kind of private. So if they're getting ready for a surgery or something or preparing for something life altering, they can kind of get in there and vent and be around people who have maybe been through something similar and can talk with them or give them tips on what to expect or how to go through recovery. Because even with the gardens, if you have a surgery coming up and your recovery is going to take a couple weeks or months, your garden is going to suffer, or else you got to have a stockpile of your medication. So in the Discord, we just share all of that, the handy hacks, our successes, our failures, everything, because it's never going to be a perfect run. You're never
Mhm.
gonna you're never gonna hit it out of the park every time, but just so you keep with it, that's all we could ask for.
Well, that is one of the most endearing parts of the story, I feel like, is that not only are you there for each other on an educational basis, but you're there for an emotional support as well.
Yeah, I was until I started Canna Capable, I had never interacted or met another person with muscular dystrophy. And now we have a gentleman in Australia with muscular dystrophy, another member in Canada, one on the West Coast in Oregon. So it's been extremely helpful for me as well to be able to see that there are other cultivators out there gardening from a wheelchair with a similar form of muscular dystrophy that I have, which again, it almost didn't exist in my world until I got to see other people that have it and are going through it. And we want to make sure to let the people know that they're not alone in this, and there are other people having similar struggles that want to see them succeed.
So the cannabis industry likes to pride itself on being very inclusive. Do you feel like the corporate cannabis world is as inclusive as it advertises?
Um, so corporate anything comes with its own pitfalls. It's gonna be a take and give with either of those situations. You can ask or you can request so much, but certain things are gonna come down to profitability, sadly. And
Mm.
the as little as I've reached out to the corporate world, it's been a double-edged sword, I guess, and it's been very minimum on my part, I must say.
Mm.
Um, but like Nick from Rooted Leaf, who I've been in contact with, he's all about getting us, member discount codes, helping us in our Discord. Any members have questions, he's always there to help. Bigger places, it seems that we're such a small community. I don't really tend to expect much,
Mm.
but I will I will advocate however I can to get in their ear. And hopefully doing things like this, maybe places like AC Infinity, Vivo Sun will see that, you know, there is a place where they can help.
Just looking at the industry as a whole, how how do you feel about the current state of the cannabis industry right now?
It's making me nervous because I see a lot of big money players come in. I see a lot of, the mom and pops going to the wayside, the people that had put their time in and have caught, charges or whatever in that industry being pushed out for guys in suits. I went to NECAN the first year I was in Chicago, and that was just, I was a fish out of water there. It was all, you know, corporates, did sales pitches, a lot of industry where that's not what we're here for. We want to concentrate on on the single gardener and
Mm.
making sure they're successful. Where I feel the profitability from our community wouldn't be as great as with other places or other people.
Mhm.
So that's going to be something too, because we are a small community, but it's hard. It's hard in being so small with, you see multi-state operators and conglomerates. And again, getting back to a dispo system that just, it doesn't seem to be educated on either end. So trying to get education out there to the industry and getting the right information to them is also a very important thing.
When it comes to the regulatory side, you know, uh, are you encouraged by what's been happening? Are you kind of trepidatious as to how things have been handled in the current administration? What are your thoughts there?
So it's strange because I started off in going to Colorado was my first introduction to a um, pre what would you call that? It was before Prohibition had come in, so I was able to see what a community and a society that was founded on cannabis and protecting the plant was really like. And it was
Mm,
a completely different world from what I had grown up around the Chicagoland area.
mm.
And then to see with the laws changing and what's kind of happened to Colorado's scene and how again the mom and pops are being pushed out and the end quality doesn't seem to be there. And then coming from the Chicago market, it's they only released 22 licenses at the beginning, and it was like you had to have like $1.5 million in the bank to even apply for a license.
Mm.
And how that's gone since then, I wouldn't say it's any better. The quality coming from the dispos is questionable to say the least. I've had people come in from out of town and they were excited to come from Prohibition land to go into a dispo, and out in Chicago, they're kind of like your dentist's office. You're going in, it's a very sterile environment. You're handed an iPad to kind of scroll through. Where again, when coming from Colorado, they have graffiti on the walls, music playing. They're handing you the jar so you can open it and smell it, see if the terpenes are something that your body responds to or not. Because smelling cannabis is a great indicator. If your body gets excited from the smell of cannabis, it's probably because it's going to do something good for you.
Mm.
Whereas if you're scrolling on an iPad and you're just looking at THC percentages, you're not going to have the information there. So the dispo scene could definitely use a lot of updating and information. They need to be informed a lot better on what they're giving to their customers.
Are things improving in Illinois?
There's more dispos out here for sure. They're on every corner, and the business seems to be good for them. But with the pricing and the tax structure on these, you can go and get a single gram cart for $75, and you're paying almost 105 out the door with the taxes. And for some people, that's just not an option, especially if you're disabled and you're living on limited means. That could wipe you out for a month to just have a single gram cart of questionable content, I
Mm.
guess.
So, what are your thoughts on the Overcast's community effort on overgrow?
That is something that I think is very important, is to at least have the option to the end consumer for wanting to cultivate their own cannabis, disabled or not. That option should be on the table for everybody. Because it is a process, even with all the assistance and stuff, you still have to put in work. You still have to have a cure spot. You gotta make sure you're set up. But even getting connected to a community, if you can't cultivate yourself, there was somebody that can help you with whatever your needs are.
How did your first grow help you establish a connection to the plant?
So I grew up in the automotive industry. I worked on cars my whole life. I had always been very hands-on with anything I did. And towards when I started to grow, I was losing my ability to drive. So it was a saving moment for me to have something to pour that energy into, not being able to work on my cars, not being able to race them. I needed something to do. And the plant, I'd always had a special connection with the plant before cultivating it. And I'd always believed in it. But once I got to interact with the live product and just take care of them and go through the whole cycle and see from seed to start to cure, and then to be able to consume my own product was just, it's as good of a feeling as you could ask for. If that's something you're interested in, being able to provide for yourself, especially with disabilities, is something that we take very big pride in. So it was something I definitely knew I wasn't going to be leaving anytime soon, and I
Mm.
wanted to help other people just try. If they try and they fail and they don't like it, at least you know.
So, in your opinion, what was your best grow so far?
Um, that's hard to say because they all have their own aspects.
Hmm.
You learn every run. First one is very special to me. Um, every time I'm able to just share, it makes it really great. So they're all kind of special in their own ways, and I've been doing it for years now, and every night the lights come on, it's just excitement for me. I want to go in there, see what's happening, make sure everybody's happy, healthy, get the music going, get the CO2 going while I'm singing, and it's definitely a reciprocal relationship with the plants as you work with them.
What was the most recent cup like?
A lot bigger than the first one. The Growcast is growing, and deservedly so. This being my first public event, because I attended the very first Cultivator Cup, 50-person limit. Nobody really knew me. I was barely on Discord. I had messaged with a couple people, and this, I think they had 185 attendees and over 50 entries. Where at the first cup, I think there were 31 competitors. So it has expanded, it has grown, and to see the amount of people that came out to just say hi to me or were excited to meet me at this Cultivator Cup it had me in shock more than once. And that community, I can never say enough about the Growcast community and how they have supported me and all of our members and our whole mission. From just today, I was getting a message from Beaker Sneakers, another member who's going to be sending us some autoflowers that he bred, and he just wants to get them into the hands of our community. It's nonstop, and
Well,
it's
that's really
always appreciated.
no. That's it's really inspiring how the community has grown and grown together
Yeah,
for the betterment of everybody.
yeah, and like I said, deservedly so. Jordan puts in a lot of work. I was just for my single booth for the weeks running up to it was just stretched so thin with that in the garden. So he does a lot behind the scenes. He's moving in the shadows, making it happen and doing a lot of work for all the members.
Well, Dan, I really appreciate you taking the time today. Before we get out, is there anything else that you'd like to add or anything in particular you'd like to say to the Cannabis Equipment News audience?
If you guys do know anybody with a disability who wants to get into gardening or was gardening, reach out through Instagram, Canna_capable. We're on Discord as well. Just if you want to try, get your hand in the dirt, give it a go, and there are people that will help you if you need the help.
Anything you want to say specifically to the Discord channel?
I'm happy every morning I get to wake up and see the Discord channel doing their thing and all the different people we have in there supporting each other and just wanting to make a success out of their members. They want to see everybody else flourish, and people like Bud and Lather, Boneyard Seed Coat, Blast Coast, they make it happen for us. They are always sending us free soaps and seeds and advice and whatever I can ever need or ask for our members. So I thank all of them as well.
Well, Dan, thank you again for taking the time. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to get our message out there, and hopefully we can find a couple more members through this.
Before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. For Dan Mahon, founding member of Canna Capable, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast, and we will see you next week. Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.